Hi, I'm Tom Joyce, reporter for the York Daily Record and creator of the blog Fun with Politics. At this moment, Governor Ed Rendell and members of the Pennsylvania legislature are engaged in a series of last-minute negotiations over the state budget for the new fiscal year, which starts on July 1st. The budget negotiations have been pretty intense this year. If you're from Pennsylvania and you've been following the news, you've probably heard something about them. However, I've found that very few people I talk to really understand the process by which a new state budget is adopted in Pennsylvania. A lot of people have told me that while they acknowledge the importance of political issues, they find them rather dry and don't really go out of their way to follow them. But who doesn't love a good fairy tale? If you've seen any of my previous videos made at the Spoutwood Farm May Day Fairy Festival in Glen Rock, you've experienced along with me the curiously apt juxtaposition of politics and the fairy realm. I thought maybe I could make that work for me one more time to make the state budget process a little bit more interesting by translating it into a fairy tale. Okay, hope you don't mind if I use a cheat sheet here. Early in the year, usually in February, the governor introduces his proposed state budget. The governor's proposal isn't the actual budget so much as a general outline of what he wants the final budget to look like. Once upon a time, there was a far-off kingdom in the land of the fairies, and each year the king would call for a magical spell to be cast to bring happiness and riches to all who dwelled within the kingdom's borders. Eventually, each year's budget must be passed as a new state law, and the governor doesn't have the power to introduce or enact legislation. The members of the State House of Representatives and the State Senate must do that. But the governor does have veto power, so the state representatives and senators know that if he doesn't approve of whatever budget they give him, he can strike it down. The king summoned all of the magicians of the kingdom to his magnificent castle, so they could craft this magical spell together. For the king could not cast spells, nor could the magicians act without royal decree. State lawmakers aren't the only ones weighing in on the new state budget. In the months that follow the governor's introduction, lawmakers hear from lobbyists representing a broad array of interests. Everything from industry to labor unions, city governments to citizen activist groups, farmers to trial lawyers. From far and wide, denizens of the kingdom traveled to the king's castle, the fairies of the day and the fairies of the night, the fairies of the forests and the fairies of the meadows, and all would clamor outside the castle's gates to make themselves heard. Ostensibly, the House of Representatives is supposed to introduce the budget, the Senate is supposed to ratify it, and the governor is supposed to approve it. In reality, it's rarely that simple. Governor Rendell is a Democrat, and Republicans have been a strong presence in both the House and the Senate throughout his administration. And they usually approach the budget process with different agendas. Representatives of both the Democratic and Republican caucuses from the House and the Senate confer with each other and with the governor's office. Those negotiations typically become more intense and more contentious with the approach of July 1st, the start of a new fiscal year, and the deadline for a new state budget. But all were not in accord in the fairy kingdom. For the fairies of the day wanted more golden sunshine, and the fairies of the night wanted more pale frosty starlight. The fairies of the meadow wanted more green grass and bright flowers, while the fairies of the forest wanted more tall trees and bird song. They quarreled and quarreled until the very sky thundered with their voices. Most years they reach a compromise and agree on a balanced budget as required by the state constitution by deadline or close to it. And usually they're pretty clear on what they've passed. However, Pennsylvania residents should be vigilant because the sheer scope of the state budget means that occasionally provisions get slipped in under the radar. At long last, the gathered fairies, the magicians, and the king agreed on the spell that should be cast. Enchantment flowed from the castle and reached to the farthest corners of the kingdom. Then the fairies went back to their homes to spend their days happily flying about, singing and dancing. But fairies are mischievous creatures, so whether you're walking by day or by night, by forest or by meadow, be careful lest some beguiling enchantment take hold of you. And all Pennsylvanians have a civic responsibility to ensure that public funds are expended in an appropriate and responsible manner. Or else you might get it in the shorts come tax season. The end. Well, that's it. And remember that the world is a magical place full of enchantment. So don't be surprised if someday you look up and see fairies flying about. Especially if you've been mixing booze and mescaline. Whoa.